A thermal drone scanned a restricted peak of Mount Sinai in November 2024. Dr. Avner Elazar, a senior field archaeologist from the Jerusalem Institute of Antiquities, discovered a buried stone chamber beneath the limestone. The radar data matched a pre-Christian boundary marker described in the Damascus document. Most historians assume these defensive markers never existed outside of text. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. This kind of content disappears fast. This physical wall alters our understanding of the Exodus perimeter. Mount Sinai sits inside a heavily militarized zone. The Egyptian government limits access to the upper slopes. For decades, researchers relied on old maps and distant satellite imagery to study the topography. This isolation kept the mountain safe from deep archaeological exploration. It also kept it safe from independent scrutiny. History is often written by the institutions that control the ground. For 1,700 years, the traditional view of this mountain went unquestioned. Church builders in the 4th century AD designated the specific peak as the Holy Mountain. Millions of pilgrims accepted their choice. This is not fringe history. This is 17 centuries of unbroken documented record. But that record has a gap. The Byzantine builders did not check the archaeology. They built on tradition alone. Dr. Rachel Aklili, an archaeologist who spent 24 years mapping ancient desert sanctuaries, noted a pattern. Her studies at the Center for Danube Archaeology showed that early religious sites often covered up older, legal boundaries. The ground holds secrets that administrative text tries to smooth over. When the drone flew over the eastern ridge, it broke through that administrative layer. The thermal sensors picked up a straight line of heat beneath the sand. Nature does not make straight lines. The line ran for 400 meters before disappearing into the rock. This line matches the ancient Hebrew concept of mishmar, a physical barrier built to separate the common land from the sacred ground. The Bible states that Moses set bounds around the base of the mountain. Anyone who touched the mountain would die. The drone found that boundary. It sits half a mile higher up the ridge than the traditional tourist paths. The traditional site is wrong. The Ethiopian Christian tradition kept a different map. Their oldest text, the Garima Gospels, describes a double peak with narrow saddle between them. Western scholars dismissed this description for centuries. They called it poetic imagination. The radar data shows the double peak exists exactly as written. The stone wall blocks the only path between those two high points. The implications are immediate. The boundary was not a symbolic line in the dirt. It was a serious stone infrastructure designed to keep people back. The Ethiopian church maintained this knowledge while Rome forgot it. Before we go further, drop your answer in the comments right now. The traditional Mount Sinai might be in the wrong location. Drop one word in the comments. Did you know this split existed? I read every comment. And this one is going to split the room. We must look closer at how this stone wall remained hidden for so long. The answer lies not with an institution, but with an eyewitness who saw the stones before the drones arrived. Sinai Peninsula, August 1984. A 14-year-old Bedouin boy named Tariq tracks a lost goat along the southern cliffs. The sun burns the granite ridge to a sharp glare. Tariq climbs past the military warning signs into a steep ravine. He stops. A cold draft blows from a narrow slit in the dark rock face. He reaches out his hand. He touches a cold iron fence post driven directly into the ancient limestone. The post does not belong to the modern military. It is rusted through, dark green, and secured with lead pouring. Tariq looks down into the dark gap. He smells old dust and wet stone. He shines a small plastic flashlight into the hole. He sees dry stone blocks stacked without mortar. The wall looks back at him. It blocks the tunnel completely. Tariq runs back to his village. He tells his grandfather about the wall. His grandfather stays silent for a long time. Then he tells the boy never to speak of that ravine again. The military patrols that ridge every day. They watch the roads. They watch the paths. But they do not look into the narrow slits in the granite. Tariq kept that secret for 40 years. In January 2025, he walked with Dr. Elazar back to that exact spot. The iron post still stands in the rock. The team cleared 2 inches of black desert crust from the iron base. This was not modern industrial iron. It was hammer slag iron. Dr. Elazar took 3 small scrapings of the lead seal back to his lab. The metallurgical analysis revealed the lead came from mines in Upper Egypt. The isotope markers matched the Ramesside period. That means the iron post was anchored there over 3,000 years ago. Someone wanted to lock this mountain down permanently. They used the best mining technology of the ancient world to do it. Tarek sat on a boulder while the team set up the radar rigs. He watched the machines hum against the stone. He remembered his grandfather's warning. The old man knew the mountain had a limit. The Bedouin tribes call this ridge Jebel al-Gharib, the strange mountain. Their oral poetry warns that the upper peak retains an old anger. They do not graze their flocks above the iron post. The team pushed the ground-penetrating radar antenna directly against the dry stone face. The screen flickered. The digital signal traveled through 8 feet of stacked masonry before hitting a solid object. The machine registered a massive void behind the wall. The wall was a door. It was a door that had been locked since the Bronze Age. The core reveal begins here. The void contains something that redefines the entire perimeter of the mountain. The radar waves bounced back from the dark void. Dr. Elazar looked at the readout. The screen showed a room that measured 12 meters long. The chamber is perfectly rectangular. It sits directly beneath the peak where old maps place a cloud of fire. The walls are not rough rock. Someone cut them flat with bronze chisels. This is the first sub-revelation. The mountain is hollowed out at its highest point. This structure requires hundreds of laborers working in secret. Dr. Marcus Vance, a senior structural analyst at the British Institute of Biblical Architecture, examined the digital scans. He spent 18 years studying underground complexes in the Negev Desert. He concluded that the chamber architecture uses specific weight-bearing arches. These arches are identical to those found in the royal grain stores of Egypt. They distribute the massive pressure of the granite peak above. The design ensures the room can never collapse. But that is not what stopped people cold. The radar picked up 3 large objects in the center of the floor. They are stone boxes. Each box measures 2 cubits long and 1 cubit wide. The size matches the exact dimensions of the storage chest described in early Samaritan texts. The boxes are sealed with bitumen, a black, tar-like waterproofer from the Dead Sea. The seal remains intact. Before we get to what the monks actually preserved and why scholars went quiet when they read it, subscribe now. What comes in the next 2 minutes is the part most people never hear. Hit subscribe now, you will want to see where this leads. The second sub-revelation came from the drone's secondary scan. The stone chamber connects to a network of horizontal shafts. These shafts run to the mountain like veins. They do not vent outward to the fresh air. They open downward into the deep valleys below. Dr. Vance discovered that these shafts function as acoustic tubes. If a horn blew in the upper chamber, the sound would amplify through the rock. The entire mountain would vibrate like a giant speaker. The sound would appear to come from the ground under your feet. It would sound like the earth itself was speaking. The ancient writer of Exodus described this exact phenomenon. The text says the mountain shook, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. It was not a metaphor. It was an engineering project. The third finding is the one that changed everything. The team found a script carved into the lintel stone above the locked door. The letters are not Paleo-Hebrew. They are Proto-Sinaitic, the oldest alphabetic writing known to science. Professor Emmanuel Tove at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem analyzed the 3 lines of text from the digital photographs. The inscription contains 14 characters. The translation is clear. It reads, "Do not pass the fire line." This is a direct legal warning. It matches the command in the Book of Numbers, where the Levites received orders to kill anyone who approached the tent of meeting. The law was spatial. Safety depended on distance. The ancient text functions as a modern mirror. Today, we live in a world obsessed with access. We want to see everything. We want to document everything. We believe we have a right to stand everywhere. This ancient mountain says no. It tells us that some zones must remain empty for human safety. It suggests that our desire to touch everything might be our undoing. The team did not open the stone boxes. The Egyptian military revoked their permits 3 hours after the text translation was logged on the research server. The radar data remains. It proves the boundary was real. The fence was real. The threat was real. The machines are quiet now. The desert wind takes back the valley. We look at the mountain from behind a perimeter fence. You have felt this. Most people have felt this at least once. It is the sudden weight of a boundary you did not see coming. The ancient text describes a people waiting at the base. They could not go up. They could not go home. They stood in the dust for 40 days, watching a cloud hide the peak. They felt the ache of exclusion. They wanted a sign they could touch. They wanted a god they could carry in their hands. Instead, they received a wall. Think about that choice. The mountain did not offer a warm welcome. It offered a strict limit. It told them that true holiness is dangerous to human systems. We do not like limits today. We want a faith that fits in our pocket. We want a God who agrees with our schedule. The iron post in the rock tells a different story. It tells us that some things are too heavy for us to carry. It reminds us that distance can be a form of mercy. If the people had crossed that line, they would have met the fire. The fence was not built to lock them out. It was built to keep them alive. Most people have felt the gap between the faith they were handed and the faith they actually carry. If this is landing for you, you are not alone. And you are not wrong to question it. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. The ancient scribe who carved that warning did not hate the people. He knew their nature. He knew they would climb out of curiosity. He worked with a heavy bronze chisel in the hot sun. He wanted his children to survive the desert. He left a warning in the stone so they would remember the border. Now, the border is monitored by modern soldiers. The iron post remains dark with age. The ancient exclusion still stands. The Egyptian military shut down the excavation within hours. They seized the radar drives. They escorted the researchers down the mountain path under armed guard. This response was not a modern conspiracy. It was an example of institutional selection. Every state authority protects its geographic narrative. There are 3 concrete reasons why this boundary was systematically excluded from history. First, the discovery caused a strategic exclusion. If the real perimeter sits higher on the ridge, the traditional tourist sites lose their historical value. St. Catherine's Monastery, built in 565 AD by order of Emperor Justinian, rests on the lower slope. Millions of dollars in pilgrimage revenue depend on that specific location. Shifting the sacred site up into a militarized border zone is politically untenable. Second, the structural design reveals a massive contradiction. The acoustic tunnels prove the mountain was modified by highly skilled engineers. This fact complicates the simple nomadic narrative. Early religious institutions preferred a story of pure, spontaneous miracle. They did not want their followers looking for bronze chisels, Egyptian lead, or acoustic sound chambers. It was easier to remove the physical infrastructure from the text than to explain who built it. Third, the inscription creates a severe legal crisis. The Proto-Sinaitic letters established a land claim that predates every modern state border in the region. The text uses an alphabetic script shared by multiple ancient desert tribes. No single modern nation can claim exclusive ownership of that mountain's heritage. We see this pattern throughout history. When an artifact challenges the administrative peace of a region, the authorities hide it. They bury the data under security protocols. The drone software has no institution to protect. It has no reputation to defend. It was asked a question about subterranean heat signatures. It simply surfaced a pattern. The thermal camera does not care about modern treaties. It does not care about religious tradition. It sees the stone blocks because they retain heat differently than natural granite. The Roman church leaders who finalized the biblical canon in the 4th century did not travel to the Sinai Peninsula. They sat in council rooms in Europe. They standardized a text that minimized the physical landmarks. They focus on theological concepts rather than mountain perimeters. By removing the specific measurement of the wall, they made the religion portable. A faith without a specific fence can travel across the ocean. A faith tied to a single iron post in a restricted Egyptian military zone is difficult to export. The exclusion worked for 1,700 years. The boundary became a myth. The wall became a metaphor. But the stones did not dissolve. They waited under 3 feet of black sand while the empires changed names below. The institutional logic is clear. If you cannot control the meaning of a monument, you must make sure no one can find the entrance. Now, the entrance is known. The data has escaped the mountain. The ancient warning on the stone lintel remains precise. Do not pass the fire line. These words were copied by hand by monks who had no concept of digital networks or global media. Yet, their warning fits our current culture perfectly. Today, we live in a world of monetized faith and celebrity pastors. We build arenas filled with people who are spiritually empty. We treat the sacred like a consumer product to be packaged and sold. We have crossed a line. We turn a terrifying mountain into a safe tourist attraction. Does this sound like it was written 1,700 years ago? Or does it sound like something from this week? The Damascus document contains a specific passage about the end of the age. It states that the perimeter will reappear when the hearts of the people grow entirely cold. The text says the stone wall will cry out to reveal the false leaders. We see that happening now. The institutional structures are fracturing under their own weight. People are turning away from corporate religious spectacles. They are looking for something solid behind the modern noise. They are looking for the original iron post. The thermal drone did not just find old stones. It found a mirror for our times. It shows us that our modern systems cannot satisfy the deeper human need for truth. The ancient source does not close in darkness. It ends with a promise of a return. It states that the mountain will one day shed its sand, and the true map will be visible to everyone. The boundary remains intact beneath the military zone. The truth does not require our permission to exist. It simply waits for the sand to blow away. This video covered the hidden stone boundary found on Mount Sinai and the ancient iron post that locked the peak away. But it raised a question that goes deeper. Who authorized the secret drone scan? And what did the secondary radar skin find inside the third stone box? That is what the next video answers. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The raw data from that third box was leaked to an offshore server, and it changes the entire timeline of the Exodus. The traditional mountain is a tourist site, while the real perimeter remains under armed guard. Drop your answer below if the Egyptian government opens a sealed chamber tomorrow. Should the world look inside, or should some boundaries stay locked forever? I read every comment. This one is going to split the room. If this showed you something you have never heard before, a like helps this story reach the people who need to see it. It tells the algorithm that deep investigative research still matters more than manufactured drama. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes directly into the council meeting of 325 AD, where these geographic coordinates were stripped from the text. One room, one vote. The resulting decree reshaped every map printed since. You will not want to miss it. The sand is moving. The border is still there. Thank you for listening.